All right, we're recording. we're, we're already into it. So welcome to the Love What You Do podcast. My guest today is Kira Macoun, a serial entrepreneur, a friend. I met her several years ago. We sat next to each other in a sexual orientation. Don't mess with each other. Introduction to a personal development program, and we started a friendship right there of starting to mess with each other.
over lewd joking, right? In the sexual harassment.
The sexual harassment class, and we were screwing with each other already. And Kira's a successful serial entrepreneur. She runs a business called Comfy Fitness, which is starting to really explode with your online growth. And this whole pandemic has actually been kind of blessing in disguise. You also run a personal development or partnered with a personal development company called Kimbra, which helps entrepreneurs make more money through rituals. And you've also got one other thing you love your political stuff.
Yeah, I've always been an activist and organizer. I have, my first bout of activism was back in 2003 to protest the Iraq War. And then, I started, when I moved to Chicago, that's when I got really into it. And then I became an organizer in 2009. And all of that transpired into me doing political commentary on Monday and Wednesday nights for a company called Hard Lens Media in Chicago.
Cool.
So, yeah.
So we're going to jump into your story because you weren't born out of the womb a fitness instructor. You've had some pretty big struggles, you share with me, and I know they're part of your story. Why don't we kind of just jump into, a little bit of who you are and your story, I don't want to say growing up, but I remember you sharing with me, the story of living out of your car for a while, right?
Yeah, I like bringing that up, like, oh my goodness, it's like a lifetime ago, right? So I grew up a military brat, which probably also speaks to why I'm so interested in politics. My whole family's military. I was one of the only grandchildren to not go into the military coming up, although I almost did. I almost went as a drill instructor, hilariously enough. I would have been a good drill instructor, by the way.
You kind of still are.
A little bit. And I'm also really good at following rules and taking orders. So funny enough, I think I would have been great in the military. But, I actually got talked out of it by a friend back in high school. He was actually my boyfriend at the time. But he had been my best friend for some time before that. And he's like, no, you should go to college. And I was like, okay. And I was the first person in my family to go to college. And so that was a really big feat for me. Especially because at the time, my mom was a single mom. When my mom and dad divorced, we moved out of a nice neighborhood, went to a very rough neighborhood. My mom was making about $4.15 an hour, with my sister and I living in the home, and her still on and off supporting my brother, who's 7 years older than me. So it was rough times, and and my household growing up, when my dad was at home, wasn't very safe. After things shifted and my brother moved out and my mom and dad divorced, then it was just like kind of every man for himself. So my sister, who's 7 years younger than me, who also owns a business, and my brother owns a business too, by the way. All three of us became entrepreneurs. Crazy. So I was basically raising my sister for a period of time. From the time of 11 or 12 years old until I left for school right before turning 18. And I had decided at that time that I wanted to go to a private university, even though we were broke. Unless I got money or a massive loan, which I really didn't know anything about at the time, like many 17 and 18-year-olds don't know about taking out tens of thousands of dollars in loans and what that means in the future. But that's what I did. And the reason I decided I wanted to go to a private school is because all of my friends I was living in Iowa at the time, and all my friends were going to University of Iowa. And the way that I saw it, in my 17-year-old mind, and God, I don't know how I knew this at the time. And I thank my young self every day. And I thought to myself, you know what? I feel like just going with my friends to college is just going to be like 13th grade 14th grade. And I decided that like I needed to build a network. And that's where I went. And I was like, well, what kind of network do I want to get into? Well, I definitely want to get into a network of a private school, and so that was where that decision making came in. And I was very obsessed with becoming extremely successful. And that started at a really, really young age. And when I say successful, I mean financial freedom, leisure freedom, loving everything that I'm doing, loving every day. A good friend of mine from way back when I was young had me listen to a tape that we made together, and when we were in third grade. And in third grade, I was already like, I'm the richest woman in town, and I own all of the businesses. It was, it's funny. You're like, Kira didn't come out a fitness instructor from the womb, but I do believe I came out of the womb in some way, like knowing what I wanted. And maybe that was just from experiencing my mom and my dad and their horrible unhappiness. And just thinking like, well, I know what I don't want, But yeah, I knew that in the realm of time, and then just in joy, just like expanded joy. And so I went to a private university and scraped by. I had 4 jobs in college.
Where'd you go?
I went to Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois.
That's a good name. It's a very good name.
It's a very good name. Very good. Very distinguished sounding indeed. I do declare. So I went to Bradley University. I ended up majoring in television and radio production because I wanted to be a political pundit at the time. Funny how things transpire. And like I said, I was working several jobs, some work study. I started at one point working in a bar as well once I was able to do that. And I paid my way through my sorority and through school, taking on loans. Ended up getting a scholarship later on that helped in my final 2 years. So my debt coming out of school was about $48,000. And I think my last payment is next month on my federal loan, which is amazing. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm 37 years old, just for everybody to get an idea of what that was like. So I, at one point, because I so badly wanted to be a political pundit, I decided that I was going to intern, instead of in Germany. My minor was German. Instead of in Germany, I would go intern in DC and work around Capitol Hill. Yeah. And I did that. And I did that for almost a full year. And I hated it. I really, really hated it. First of all, Washington, D.C. was the first big city I lived in. And so, because Peoria is like a mid-sized town, right? And then I went to D.C. and it was my first big city. So that in and of itself was a good amount of culture shock. I was also dead broke, which would be very much the theme of my life for a while to come after that. And there were a lot of struggles inside of that. That this is the time, as you were pointing to, Brad, that I did have to live in my car for a stint, because I was in between an apartment that I was waiting for and housing from the college, and I really couldn't afford to go anywhere or sublease, and so I was crashing on people's couches. I was living out of my car, which was a nice Dodge Spirit, so it was fairly roomy. They don't make them anymore. And fire engine red. Nice. And, you just like, I just made it work. And it's interesting because at the time, I guess you don't know what you don't know, right? Like I didn't realize that was like an original thing. I mentioned that there was like not very much safety in my house growing up. I didn't realize that was not okay and not normal. And so a lot of that discovery came when, a landmark, Brad, where you and I met. I had no idea that I had been abused as a child. I had no idea. That wasn't present for me at all. And just like living in my car for a few weeks at the beginning of the fall no, it was the beginning of the summer. It was no thing, you know, I'm just going to live in my car for a few weeks. Not a big deal. And that's how I got through. That's kind of like how I fumbled through in life. After I didn't make it in DC, didn't make it. I hated it. Mm-hmm. I left and I was like, you know what? Maybe political punditry isn't for me. I'm not smart enough. I don't fit in. I'm too much of a goofball. You know, I'm not an ass kiss. So that was really tough for me. And so I traveled back to the Midwest. I finished my senior year at Bradley. And then after the summer in Peoria, I just packed up and I drove out to Los Angeles. Before going out to LA, you know, because I wanted to use my degree. I had this great degree that cost me a lot of money in television and radio production, and I wanted to use it. And at Bradley, a huge contingent of the people that are in my major go to Los Angeles. And so, you know, I think the most that people are going to learn from this discussion with me, here it is again, is network. So what I did before I moved out to Los Angeles is I went to Bradley University's alumni office. Yeah. And I found everybody that was living in LA that was a Bradley alum, and I personally called them on the phone. So that's how I spent a large portion of my summer, also working in a bar and partying my ass off. And yeah, I made a lot of connections through that. And again, it was just one of those things. It's like, well, duh, this is what you need to do. Yeah. And it really did. It saved my ass. I moved out to LA with everything that would fit in my car and $1,200. I thought $1,200 was a lot of money at the time. I spent all summer saving it up. And this was 2004 now. Yes, 2004. Yeah. And with $1,200 in my pocket and my Dodge Spirit packed, I drove across the country to Los Angeles. I crashed on the living room floor of a Bradley alum. I met another Bradley alum that I hadn't known before through another Bradley alum that I ended up being roommates with, who is now my dearest, bestest friend in the whole world. Her name's Mandy Miller. She's an amazing instructor of fitness as well. You can check her out on the web. Yeah, and she lives in LA right now. And we became fast friends. And then within 2 weeks of moving to LA, I had myself an apartment, a job, and the rest was history. Now, my first job in LA, I worked from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m., 6 days a week for $600 a week. And my night off was Tuesday.
Ooh, that's a good night off.
Yeah. Everybody was ready to party. And I'm for anybody that doesn't know, I am a total party girl. I love going out. I love dancing. I love drinking. I love smoking weed. I love it all. So I'm indulgent in every sense of the word. And so this was a tough time for me because that social aspect of my life was very gone. And I also was, making up the amount of money that that I had lost on my travels. I had to borrow money from this stranger who's now my best friend, Mandy. I borrowed $800 from her to get set up in our apartment. And she didn't even know me. But because she knew me through another friend from Bradley, she trusted me enough to give me $800 on loan, which of course I paid her back. Always make good on your debts because you never know when you're going to need to take out more. Yeah. Your personal debts, fuck the banks. So, so anyway, so I worked in Los Angeles. I jumped from production job to production job. And again, there was a lot of scheming in my head about networking and like, where do I get in? Where do I go? Who do I talk to get a kind of job that I want? And one day, a Bradley alum emailed me and said, hey, I'm emailing a bunch of people that I know for this opportunity. I was working at Cartoon Network as a gopher, as a PA, an office PA, getting coffee for people, doing things around the office. And this email landed in my lap, and it was a forward from a forward. And, Adam Cohen sent it to me, and I was like, hey, look at this. It's a call for an on-set production assistant to the executive producer of Nickelodeon. At Nickelodeon. He was the guy responsible for Kenan and Kel, all that, iCarly, Zoe 101, Drake and Josh. And so I took a long shot and I called. I was big on calling back then. I just pick up the phone, I called the number on there, and I left a message. And I think that I just also have the kind of voice that just sounds confident, even if I'm not, because it's so loud and unabashed. I know, right? Like, roar. And then I wrote an email after I left the message, and I said, hey, here's my resume. I just left a message. I would love to be interviewed for this position. And they got back to me, and right away too. And they're like, well, who do you know on set? Who do you know that works on the set? And I was like, well, I got this email message from my friend Adam Cohen. And they're like, we don't know him. Who'd he get it from? And I was like looking through the email, and I was like, Michelle so-and-so. And they're like, all right, well, could you come for an interview today at 6 p.m.? Now, mind you, for those of you who know Los Angeles, I was in Hollywood, and their offices were in Malibu. And the interview, 6 p.m. was about, I think it was 2.5 hours away at the time.
It's about the time of the drive.
I had to be at work until 5. So here's what I did.
I'm sure this is going to be very on the level.
I went to my boss at Cartoon Network and I said, hey, I have an opportunity to be an on-set assistant for an executive producer at Nickelodeon. I need to leave early. And she said, okay. And that was it. I got out of there. On my drive home, I called my roommate, best friend, Mandy, and I said, will you print off a resume for me and put it in a nice, leather folder, and put it right by the door because they're like, bring this, And there's a part of me when I look back on the story that thinks they were setting me up for failure. I mean, they know there's no way I was going to make that interview, so I busted home to I lived around Beverly Hills adjacent area and grabbed the Junior. Yeah, exactly. Grabbed the folder and then dashed out to Malibu. I got up to it was at Pepperdine University, which is at the top of a mountain. I got up to the top of the mountain. I was amped because I had 10 minutes to spare still. I couldn't believe it. I get to the top of the mountain. I take out my phone to call the number they told me to call, to get the golf cart to come and get me, to bring me to the offices. And I had no cell service. Oh. And in fact, no one had cell service up there. And the production knew that as well because they had to get special cell phones for the production. So to have me call them at the top of the mountain seemed like an impossibility. Anyway, I didn't know any of this at the time, but I did see a light on in a building. So I busted ass over there. I get inside the office and I was I was in a frenzy. And I saw these students sitting there and I was like, hey, do you guys have phone number for the Zoe 101 offices on campus? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, can I use a phone? And they were like, sure. And so they gave me the landline. I called the number and they sent the golf cart out to come and get me.
Nice.
I got in the golf cart with Noah Zingarelli. And he looked at me and he was like, are you sure you want this job? And I was like, what does that mean? He's like, this guy's a nightmare. And I'm like, okay. I was like, yeah, I think I want this job. I went, I interviewed. I got it the next day. They didn't even call me for a follow-up. I got the job. And I went on set, and lo and behold, Dan was a handful. Very much so. There was a lot of getting used to for me, but ultimately in the end, he ended up hiring me as his personal assistant. And I worked for him and Nickelodeon for nearly 2 years before I asked for a raise. And then when I didn't get the raise, I put in my actually 6-week notice. I helped them train someone to take my place, who quit 2 months later because of stress headaches. And then they hired 2 men to replace me. So they should have just given me the raise. But now when I look back, I'm grateful that they didn't, because the reason I was asking for a raise is because I was looking at the amount of money I was making and thinking, this is not enough money for the amount of work I do and the amount of stress I take on. So I'm going to ask for more money. And when they didn't, I just thought to myself, well, I don't love working in television. I don't even watch television. I've never owned a television of my own. And so I'm just going to go. And that was it.
So go ahead.
And that was it of my television career. And within 6 weeks, I was driving back to Chicago with no money and no job. Not back to Chicago. I never lived in Chicago, but I went to Chicago.
So you made the choice to go back to Chicago, or go to Chicago.
Right. To the Midwest. We'll put it that way. Back to the Midwest, but to Chicago, because I knew myself at that point as a big city girl, having lived in DC and LA and really loving them.
That's awesome. I didn't realize, I know some of your story and we spent a lot of time together, but I didn't know that story. It's cool.
It's a great story. And again, you become more cautious, I don't want to put that on anybody. I have found myself to become more cautious as I've gotten older about the decisions I make and how quickly I step into something. And I think back on my young self, my 20 to 25-year-old self, because I was 25 when I started Comfy Fitness. And I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? And how did I know that was going to work out? And I think that it's not about knowing whether or not it was going to work out. I don't think that ever crossed my mind that it wouldn't.
And so faith and confidence.
Yeah, faith, confidence. When Carrie and I decided to start personal training, a personal training business together, one of the things I said was, well, I've never failed at anything and you've never failed at anything. So I don't see why we would fail at this. And I never made a single high school play, even though I auditioned for every single one. That's a failure after a failure after a failure after a failure. And I never saw it. I never saw myself as failing anything, even if I didn't succeed the way that I thought I should have. And I honestly think that those blinders on what failure is what catapulted me into the life that I live now, which is maybe the most blessed, blissful, outrageously, I always want to put the word lucky to it, life that I could imagine living, honestly. So
pretty cool.
Yeah, it's amazing that that living into failure thing is definitely, it's a real thing. Mm-hmm. And it's, if you're working on something and all you see or fear is failure, then that's all you'll see is failure. Yeah. You mentioned, Brad, earlier that, my business has started to take off, and we started live online services 2 years ago. And up until March, we had 24 users online. We did, and we worked on that for 2 years. And we really had a vision that this could be something that succeeds. And we just never let up. And then what happened, and everybody knows what happened. We all got sheltered in place, and everybody had to come up with a different solution to their gyms. And there we were ready and waiting. And had we just said, oh, this is so much work and it's not succeeding, then I see that we would have been in a scramble like every other fitness organization to get our shit together. And we weren't. We saw the value in what we were offering, and we were just insistent that people weren't educated enough on what we were offering. So it was all about education and marketing. And it wasn't that we had a bad product. It was all about the education and marketing of it.
Yeah. And I think it forced people to realize that there's value in it.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, how, I guess the one question that comes to mind is, where was the pivot into fitness? Where did you discover that was what you love to do and love to teach, and, your bigger, fuller expression?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. I started exercising at the age of 12. That was the first time that I had ever, this is funny because I don't even do weight loss in my fitness offerings. I'm a pain reduction specialist, but I started exercising at the age of 12, mostly just because I wanted to wear spandex and I
Me
wanted to be just
too.
like
Oh,
Denise Austin. Yeah. But I loved the like spandex. Oh, see, I love the spandex with the big belt. So now I get to dress like, like a fitness instructor every day. And I just always loved the fashion. I know it's silly, but that was what got me to start working out at 12. And then at 15 is when I gained my first amount of substantial weight. And that's when I started taking exercising very seriously. I was, by the time I was a junior and senior in high school, I started getting up at 5:30 in the morning to hit the gym. And then I would go to school after that. And then I would work out after school. I was either lifting, in the morning and then, running in the evening or whatever. And I did this all through high school. I actually got a D- in gym class because I skipped all the time because it was a waste of my time.
you did this in the morning. I'm going to do it after this anyways.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm not going to gym class. But luckily for me, I was also an athlete. And so my gym teacher knew this about me. And you only had to pass fail gym to pass high school.
Yeah.
And so he gave me a D-, but I also got a National Physical Fitness Award at the time. And he was the one that submitted it. So the gym teacher that gave me a D- also submitted the nomination for a National Physical Fitness Award.
For dang good.
Yeah, absolutely. He's like, you're in the gym every day for no reason, other than your own, own volition. So I've always been into fitness. When I lived in LA, I had a membership. I was a regular exerciser. I discovered yoga then. I love yoga. I'm not a yoga instructor, but I do love yoga. And then when I moved to Chicago, I left television. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was just like floating around. I got myself my gym membership almost right away when I got to Chicago, because what would I do without a gym? And I got a job working at a sushi restaurant because I had, since high school when I worked at a 50s diner, and then in college when I worked at a bar, I had serving experience, and the service industry in Chicago is incredible. And so I got myself a job at a sushi restaurant, fine dining. And then I was just living life. I was, figuring things out. And I was on the phone with my dad, who actually passed when I was 25 years old. He and I were chatting, and he was like, Kira, you get up in the morning and you go to the gym and you work out. And you come home, you get ready for work, you go to the job, and you work until, 11, 12 at night. And then you go out and you party with your friends. And then you get up and you do it again. You go to the gym, and he's like, why don't you just get paid to go to the gym? And I was like, okay, you can do that? Like, what?
Do that.
And so he started actually helping me. My dad was a huge piece of the puzzle here. He helped me get a loan from the GI Bill because he was deemed unemployable due to his service in the Army. And so it's this like luck thing, right? I don't think I could have gone to the school that I went to for personal training had I not had that opportunity. And I took that opportunity, and that's where I met my business partner. And it's a really great school in Chicago called the National Personal Training Institute. And if I hadn't gotten that personal training, I definitely wouldn't have started my own business, because that school really sets you up to run the gamut on whatever you want to do in the fitness industry. Do you want to work for a gym? Do you want to do management? Do you want, all of the things you could do, they really dive into in this schooling. Not to mention, I wouldn't have met Carrie, who is like basically, my platonic lifelong partner. And we were going to start fitness business with 3 other guys in our class. We were talking about all going in on a big fitness space that we could all share together. And I found over my course of that class and that certification that they weren't horribly dependable people. And if you're thinking about taking on a business partner, I would say the number one thing you want to look at is whether or not you can depend on them. Yeah. If you can't depend on them, like whether or not it's grounded in any kind of reality, if you can't depend on them, that it's probably not going to work out, you know? And I remember we were putting together our graduation party, and this group wanted this group that we were going to go into business with were the ones who wanted the graduation party. And I was like, great, let's get it set up. And you know me, Brad, I'm like, all right, here's what we need. La, 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 la. Let's do this. You know, what about this? And
drill instructor.
Yeah, exactly. And we started going to work on it. And these guys that we were going to be, you know, moving into this partnership with just kept falling short on the stuff that we asked them to do. And so at that point, I told Carrie, I was like, I don't think I want to go into business with these guys. Like, I'm really not interested in doing that. I think I'm going to step out. And she agreed. And so we ended up not going into business with them. And after we graduated, I applied to 2 different gyms that I sabotaged any sort of chance of actually getting a job at. That was, you know, and it was so funny because it was clear that it wasn't like I was actively sabotaging it. I just knew that I wasn't going to be hired at a place that wasn't going to accept me 100% for who I was.
Yeah.
And so one shishi gym that I went into, the first thing they started talking about was their designer clothing that they sell at the front of the store. And like, I didn't even know what Prada was until I was like 20 years old. So I'm like the last person you want to talk to about designer clothing and shopping.
I want your butt to look good naked.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that was actually their motto, this gym, look good naked, which is also not inside of my philosophy of fitness. You know, fitness is about being young forever. It's not about necessarily how your body looks. It can be. But I think that a lot of times when it's about how the body looks, it turns people off to the possibility of fitness for themselves. And so,
like that's the end goal or something.
Yeah. Like that's the end goal. And if you can't get there, you might as well not even try.
Yeah.
You know, what if you're born shorter and stockier? What if you're really long and lean and you're just always gonna like have these long limbs? Like, it's not about that. It's about making what you got work real great, you know? And so, so I just didn't align with that philosophy. And I was fairly clear about that in my interview. And so they turned me down before I could turn them down. Yeah. And then my next interview was actually with FFC, and they gave me this stupid questionnaire, stupid in my own opinion, right? About like ethics. And so many of the questions were things like, there was one where it was like, just as an example, you find out a coworker is stealing from work. You know, what do you do? Do you report it to management? And it was like, yes, I don't know, or no, or like, it was like 5 answers inside of that. And mine was, I don't know, like almost every time. Because I'm thinking to myself, like, well, I mean, what are they stealing? You know, are they stealing toilet paper from the bathroom? Because I'm probably not going to report that. Are they stealing money from the register? Well, that's a different story, right? And so in my mind, I'm just like, this isn't a complete enough story for me to act. I knew the answer they wanted.
Yeah.
That's not me. I'm not going to say, yes, I would do that. No, hell no. I probably wouldn't. Let's be real honest. And so, I did that, filled out the questionnaire, and they decided not to hire me.
Really?
Really? And so I got back in contact with Carrie. This was maybe 2 months after we graduated. And I said, hey, how's it going? And she's like, I haven't even applied to a single job yet. And so I was like, okay, we need to do something. And so we got together in my kitchen at the time, and we decided that we were going to work with each other to build a personal training company. And I decided that we would work on our business at least 4 hours a day from Monday through Friday. We didn't know what we were going to be doing inside of that time. Neither of us had ever owned a business. Neither of us had gone to business school, but certainly there was enough work for us to be doing at least 4 hours a day of work on, which now I kind of laugh at because I'm like, I could get my work done in 2 hours today, you know, and of course then see my clients. But back then I was like, and we held ourselves really accountable to that 4 hours for a while until we had actually enough work to be like, okay, no
enough
more.
Clients.
Yeah, enough clients, enough work, understanding like what it is we needed to do to market, all of that. But yeah, once we started getting in clients, that definitely, ate into that like 4 hour work day. But we did things like we designed our own business card. Neither of us were in design. Carrie was a musical theater major from NYU. So, I'd say of the 2 degrees, mine was the most useful because we were also making videos, really fantastic scripted videos with editing and music and the whole nine, because that's what my degree was in. So why the heck not?
Yeah.
And, we took those handmade business cards and little marketing like handbills, and we went around the neighborhood and we actually papered cars. We flyered people's homes and like, don't put anything in the mailbox, but you like put things in the little scoop or in the door, and so we littered the neighborhood with little paper flyers about ourselves. But we definitely created our contracts. We ended up creating our website at the time, our social media, which was, I think at the time, was that MySpace? No. Yeah, it was MySpace. And then we switched over to, I know, dude. I know. Long time ago.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, because I remember, we were on MySpace and then we went over to Facebook, and my best friend, Mandy, who was living in LA, was like, finally, you're on Facebook. I'm only joining Facebook because I own a business. There's no other reason, because I have an aversion to like social media. And so
now you're in the middle of it.
And now I'm on it constantly. Right. But I'm actually really quite good at like not getting sucked into it.
Yeah.
So we started our business in that vein, and we started out by training in people's homes. And then we moved into a duplex, and we created the upstairs of that duplex to be our fitness studio and the downstairs, the living space. And we did that for 4.5 years.
This is in Chicago, right?
This was all in Chicago. We did that for 4.5 years. And then after 5 years of business and working out of our home with clients, we finally got we saved up to get our own brick and mortar. In that time, we also created a children's television show. And I am actually now talking to my former boss at Nickelodeon. We have a meeting tomorrow about actually doing that thing that we created 10 years ago. And yeah, so again, no failure. There is no failure, right? It's just like, it's just on hold. So yeah, I've owned 5 businesses. Well, technically 6, but one was inside of Comfy Fitness. So, so we went ahead, we got our brick and mortar, and we were in the brick and mortar for 6 years, and it was great. We had tons of trainers kind of come and go. We had some real big superstars. We had some trainers fall flat on their faces, and we just kind of built our, we have a whole manual of how things work inside of our company now. Contracts, everything is formalized, everything is written out. We've created our own methodology that we share and train our own personal trainers inside of, that help people move freely in all planes of motion without pain. And, over time, of course, I've refined my own training, and I've gotten more and more certifications. I'm a certified Pilates instructor, certified spin instructor, cycling instructor. There's a difference. I'm also a certified kickboxing instructor.
People.
Yeah, exactly. Certified kickboxing instructor, as well as a certified personal trainer. I'm also certified in clinical somatics, which is a mind-body.
Excited about.
That's what I really, really push, because, fitness is having really great fitness is important. And I feel like that is a narrative that's becoming popular now. And so now I like to move into the next I like to move into the next thing, Brad. I'm like, okay, when I first started in personal training, like being meticulous about form was something that was like not as drilled into people in my experience, and so I got real picky about form, and that's what our methodology got created out of. And we noticed that people started having like great pain reduction. And then the next thing I moved into, which was clinical somatics, and that I am I'm actually, I think, still the only fully certified clinical somatics instructor in Chicago. That's soon to come to an end though. What somatics is the other side of the contraction. So in working out, we contract the muscle to build it, to create maybe more range of motion, create more endurance and strength. And then in somatics is just the other side of the coin. It's allowing the muscle to release from tension. So a lot of pain in the body is more about functionality than about structure. Sure, you can have a surgery and then have to deal with pain because of the surgery, but a lot of post-surgery pain is actually from the recovery period and, protecting things. And so over time, your body memorizes a way of being that protects you. And then at a certain point, it's not useful anymore. And in fact, starts to hurt you. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? It's basically the body side of transformational work. And that's what got me really into it. I skipped over a huge turning point in the business and in my life, which was in 2014 when I did Landmark. And Landmark is what really opened my eyes to just how many blocks I was putting in front of myself, but also how so much of what I had a lot of pride in about myself wasn't helping me. I am an incredible faker and performer, right? Yeah, exactly. I'm an incredible faker and performer. And so I can go to a job interview and get the job. There's no problem with me getting it. And when one does that in a context of like, I really want this to be a huge success.
Yeah.
There is a certain level of behind the scenes work that needs to get done. And luckily for me, I had a business partner who was really in tune with that stuff, but I wasn't. And so that's when I started really like facilitating and helping around the back end of our business, because I'd always been the front woman. I'd always been the person like going out and meeting the people, and I'm great at that. And I'm glad we fed to my strengths. And it's so important to know your strengths and also be familiar in working inside of your weaknesses. Yes, you want to hire people out to help in that general area.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how your own business works in the back end, I really think it behooves one to know that, even if they don't think it's something that's important for them.
Yeah. Like you don't have to hone the skill or be an expert at it, but you should understand the basics, of at least the concepts inside of it. So you can trust and have a good conversation with those people, right?
Exactly. And know which questions to ask and understand when it's time to flip on the up, or take a step back and pause for a second. Yeah. There's a lot of conversations in those numbers and in those structures that without full awareness around them, there's no way to actually make a decision. Yeah. Not one based in anything that, is grounded in reality. And so that was one of the very first big things that I got from Landmark was like, yeah, yay, I get to be a front man and I'm great at it. And that's all good. And there's a whole back end part of things
mental blocks
that need to be addressed. Yeah. And actually it's funny. One of the 6 businesses I owned was the thing that got me into Landmark, which was a Mary Kay business.
Ooh.
At one point I was just so sick of working in the restaurant industry and working for other people that I ended up quitting. And that was also a glorious quitting, if you guys want that story. But, and I decided that I was going to start a Mary Kay business because I wanted something really simple that I could just make a good amount of money, not have a boss, and could do on my own time. And I did really well as a consultant, so well that I became a director after 3 years of consultantship, but I sucked at being a director. It was awful. It's a whole new game when you're at that level. And I had none of the back end skills to do it. I had nothing set up. I had no idea, and building a team and keeping people motivated and keeping people jazzed about what they're doing in life. I had none of those skills. And so when I was in Mary Kay and my girlfriends around me were all earning cars and I wasn't, and I'm self-righteous Kira, right? And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I have a huge network. I am incredibly smart, incredibly good looking. I own this other business that's doing okay. Like, how is it that I'm not making this work? And it was actually at a Mary Kay party that a woman asked me when I was introducing myself. She's like, have you done Landmark? And I was like, no, and she's like, oh, you seem like someone who would have done Landmark. And again, it's like, I'm an incredible faker. And I was like, oh, what is that? And they shared it with me and I was like, oh, that sounds neat. And they eventually ended up inviting me to an introduction. And being who I am, I was like, I had already decided to sign up before I even went in. Like, yeah,
Little
sure.
did you know everything from your past that was blocking you was going to be stirred up and cause a huge explosion, a good explosion in your life,
Yeah, it was incredible. And like, things really started to turn around then. And then as I continued down the path and into leadership and onto the team management and leadership program, which is where you and I met, things in my life have completely turned around. Just for a little bit more backstory on my finances and how that ended up being. I was dead broke all the way until I was about 35 years old and maybe even past that. I never had health insurance from the time I left college, not until I got married at 35. I had figured out how to pay my bills every other month, right? This month, these bills get attention. This month, these bills get attention. And that's how I created that. I was living by the skin of my teeth and commuting by bike everywhere. I was running a Mary Kay business on my bike. I put all my Mary Kay products on my panniers and I would ride over to people's houses and do full Mary Kay parties from my bike.
I'm imagining you doing a sex toy party with the same thing.
Like pulling dildos out.
Here comes Kira riding her bike.
Here comes the sex lady by her bike.
Here, lady, drop this.
Yeah, people were like amazed, like, how are you doing this? Like, it's not that hard. If you know the basics and you can figure something out, man, like, and if failure isn't like a part of your regular conversation, it's really interesting. What can happen, and getting married was probably one of my biggest steps into fear of failure. And I said that I was never going to get married because I only saw marriage ending in failure. And so I never did it. And then, Landmark training, and then Mark comes around, my husband, and he was just too much of a catch. And so I was like, okay, maybe because the way that I used to enter into relationships was like, all right, when Adam and I break up, I think what I'm going to do is start, create this new thing. There was always in the back of my mind, when this relationship ends, this is what I'm going to do next. Or, that kind of thing. And it was never like a woe is me or I can't make relationships work.
You were living into the end of the relationship
I was
already.
just like, well, relationships end. And that's how relationships go. Yeah. And so there had to be a big transformation in that area for me to step into marriage. And now I'm like blissfully married. And for 2.5 years I have been, and it's been amazing. We live in a beautiful home together. This is my own personal, beautiful fitness studio. And now this live online project that my business partner have been working on for the last 2 years after we left our brick and mortar. I mean, we went in 100%. We're like, we're leaving the brick and mortar and we're going to dive right into this online fitness. And here we are.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I mean, that's probably not even nearly half of it, but yeah.
No, there's something I want you to share. This is just like a side story, but I guess an example, of who you are. Share what your wedding was, because it wasn't normal.
No, I didn't do anything normal. So, first of all, I had a wedding budget of like $3,000. So I was like,
Huge.
how am I gonna throw a wedding? Because that was part of my project, was to have it in a tiny budget and in Chicago. And so I started looking on peerspace.com for spaces. I found a $1,500 space available for a Friday night, and it happened to be a dinner theater. And I was like, great. And it was actually quite perfect because I already knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to basically throw a reception party that was in the context of a wedding. So it had all of the traditional parts of a wedding that I love, because I love weddings. It's my favorite social gathering, which is funny because I never was going to get married, but I had caught 8 bouquets, Brad, because it's like, I will catch that bouquet. Ruin everybody else's chance of getting married too. But I wanted all the fun parts of a wedding, but I wanted it inside of a variety show. And I wanted mine and Mark's friends, who are all like basically from the theater, to perform. So, we opened the show with a theater company called Babes with Blades, where basically I had to rescue the groom from them. And we had a big fight scene right at the beginning.
Kind of like WWF, wasn't it?
It was, yes, it was very much. And I was wearing this fabulous, like skin tight ivory onesie. And my hair that's when I had long hair. It was like huge. And after that, it was, we limboed, and then we had a fire show during dinner. And then we had, a couple of toasts that were really funny. We had for the bouquet toss, we did I Don't Want No Scrubs, and I had 5 girlfriends of mine, like, do a dance that they had created. Gosh, there were so many things that took place, but it was, I don't know how that turned out so well. I got to say, Brad, at no point during the rehearsals were all of the performers in one place, because we had performers from all over the country. They couldn't all make the 2 full company meetings that we had. But man, it was a massive success. And I ended up, as far as my budget's concerned, I did not make it. I actually doubled it. I wanted a full bar. And they, and they wouldn't let me bring booze in from outside. I asked. and so I had to, like, have the tip provided for, and all of that. But yeah, I asked one of my friends who is a chef, he used to cater, as my wedding gift, to help cater my wedding. So that's how that worked. I spent about $500 on food. And like all of the performances were the wedding gift that they were giving. And it was like probably one of the most memorable nights of my life. Well, memorable and unmemorable later on in the night.
You know what I hear in the whole thing, not just the wedding, is, I hear you've been a force of nature to create a life that you really love, like throughout all of it, So I acknowledge you for that. Like, I think a lot of people don't see themselves like that, and they don't get to do what they really want to do because there's that little voice, what are they going to think about me? Whatever,
Not to take this into a really dark place, but I think some of the darkest places is what creates us to be the incredible people we are.
Yeah.
Is when your childhood is riddled in, am I going to survive today?
Yeah.
Nothing seems really all that scary. I remember Dan at Nickelodeon, my boss, at one point asked me, and this is hilarious, and it's a lesson for life, really. He asked me, why aren't you scared of me? And he was serious, because everybody was scared of him. He made people cry daily. I would watch it. And then we started playing pranks on people, and he would he'd be like, go out to the craft table and I'm going to yell your name really loud and you come running in. And I'd be like, okay. And he'd be like, why aren't you scared of me? And I was like, my mom is way scarier than you are.
Oh, before we wrap up, you got to do your mom's impression.
Kiara, get your ass down here. Ya sage mal. I have a German mother.
Japanese. I mean, German.
I have a German mother she's not very frightening anymore at all. And she was scary growing up. And so, yeah, I was like, man, my mom is way scarier than you. And he cracked up laughing. But yeah, truly, like, when you're in a position as a kid every single day, day in, day out, and you don't know that it's weird or off color, that you're like fighting for your life. I mean, I've crazy things, gotten thrown outside naked for hours, gotten locked in a closet for elongated periods of time, just straight up torture, because my parents left myself and my brother, who was 7 years older than me, home alone. And so he and his friends would come over and just basically torture me. And not to mention, there was also physical abuse from the parents' end as well. So there was just a lot of that going on, and a lot of trespasses, we'll put it that way. And so I think what ended up happening was because I remember at Landmark, people would talk about being abused, and they would give an example of what that was for them. And this is before I had any idea that that's what had happened to me, that I had been traumatized. I'd be like, oh, that's what you call abuse?
You're lucky.
Yeah. And then it wasn't until I shared something, because I had a visual of being held down and having my face duct taped. And I shared this with my business partner, and she started crying. And she's like, why would anybody do that? I was 7 years old at the time. There were pictures of it. My family thought it was hilarious. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, that's horrible. And that's when it was just like, oh, that's not an okay thing. Oh, then all of those other things must have not been okay things. And it's to go through life and really not believe yourself to have been a victim. I think there was power in that, as messed up as that sounds. And then the power of learning it and realizing what barriers were inside of that, what's not helping anymore.
Yeah.
And then shifting those things.
Yeah. I think too, that that's just a really great reminder of you ended up on the positive end, and persevered through it and didn't know, but there's a lot of people that went through the same thing. And, they end up being adults that just redo all of that, and they abuse their kids, or they go out and they do, harm to other people, but they don't really know that it's wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. They never
were
actually
just
learned
trained. That. They were trained in the light sense of that word. That's how they don't have anything else. You are imprinting on a blank slate. And if you beat a blank slate, they're just going to go beat out in their life or whatever, right?
That's the trigger, right?
So yeah, you're pretty damn lucky. So
I am very lucky. And, just to be clear also, to be true blue, I was very abusive to boyfriends, in a lot of ways. Yelled at them, hit them. And that was a lot of stuff that I had to work myself through. Had I been a man, I'd be in jail.
Yeah.
So
well,
there's a little bit of privilege to being a female inside of that.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, let's wrap this up. In the spirit of someone that's listening and they want to go out and do something that they love, what are your last final thoughts?
There's so many. And if there's something that you love in life, and it's clear to you that that's in a direction, you don't need to be clear that that's the thing, but the direction, just go for it. And you don't have to go in 100%. I had 3 other jobs at one point outside of my business. You know, it's not about risking everything to go do something. You know, it's about taking the steps toward joy and out of fear. We see a lot of fear these days. We see fear inside of who we're electing, you know, for president. We see fear in people like losing their jobs, not having enough. And that's real. That is real. And when you dictate your life based in that fear, you're just going to get more of the same of that stuff. Yeah. You know, so there is a way to ask, like, what makes me joyful? And then bringing in just a little bit of that daily. Remember the 4 hours a day. You know, you don't have to do it 4 hours a day, but bring it in daily. What makes you really joyful? You know, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be a business that brings you joy. But it's fun to make money doing things that are fun. Like, I'll tell you that right now. It's a lot of fun. And why not you? Why the fuck not you?
Yeah, why not?
So
exactly.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. And right now is a great time to do it, especially if you're getting unemployment for the government. Like, get out. Now is the time to act.
Try it.
Yeah. Like, do it. And please, you know, if anybody listening to this podcast wants guidance and wants help inside of creating a business, it is one of my life's pleasures to help people do the things in their life that they love to do. And so, you know, you can reach out to me, ask. I do run a company that helps entrepreneurs actually create profits from their businesses. And so, and we do that through 3 weekly rituals. Very simplistic. It is not rocket science. Rituals in regards to money, in regards to leads and contacts, and I'm the time bender in regards to time. So
well, you perfectly transition that.
Yep, there you go.
So people can find more of Kira, and if you want to watch her and you want to sweat your butt off with her, you can go to comfyfitness.com.
That's right.
And what is it? Kimbra.com?
Yeah, thekimbra.com.
Okay, so TheKimbra.com.
That's right.
All right, cool. And yeah, thanks, Kira. You're awesome.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for asking me to do this. The story that I have is so long, and there's so many like ins and outs and places that I've been. Yeah, exactly. So it's really fun to reflect on some of those memories that I hadn't thought about for a little while. Like staying in my car, that was like, oh yeah, I did do that. So
well, that's been part of my seeing you as inspirational. So that's really cool. So yeah. Thanks. All right, cool. Well, thanks, Kira. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Brad.